Hello everyone, my name is Sartaj Anand and I'm the curator of TEDx Bangalore. The coronavirus has altered life as we know it across the planet. But as you can imagine, there are many Indias living in India. And the true impact of COVID-19 has been felt very differently by different stakeholders based on age, income, caste, gender, and a whole host of other qualifiers. In our latest series, Living with the Pandemic, generously supported by the Skoll Foundation, we'll be exploring how different communities are grappling with the virus and continuing to make efforts to thrive amidst the global chaos. In today's episode, we're joined by Puja, CEO of CRY, Child Rights in You, to better understand what the pandemic actually means for our children. We'll examine the state of children in India and unpack the effects of COVID-19 and the impact of our adult choices on their health, nutrition, education, and more. Thanks so much, Puja, for choosing to join us today. So Puja, tell us a little bit more about what is the state of children today. Give us that 10,000 feet overview.
So right now, as you know, we're almost into our 6th month of the pandemic, which has had stages of extreme lockdown, and sort of now limping back to normal. If I look at for children, this has been a very strange time. So one whole area that they've got deprived of is just sheer access to safe spaces like a school, like a care center, like, even the access could also be to groups of their peers, where civil society, for example, people like us do a lot of work creating safe spaces. So there's a whole issue with access to, of course, education. But to me, the more worrying part about protection, about access to immunization, we did a survey recently and we found that it was very worrying. In the first 2-3 months, there were almost 80 to 85% children had not got immunization. So, restarting all those services is very, very critical. And these are basic building blocks for children. So I think with children and the pandemic, you don't see an immediate impact, but we are really going to see a long-term impact. The second big, as you said, when you look at it from far, the really worrying thing is children need to play as much as there is their need for education or health or access to anything. I mean, so their space of playing, their space of interacting, their space of just being
children,
and when right now, when we are, even if anyone is allowing them to play or allowing them to do something, I mean, they literally have, socially distanced circles where they can only stand. So I think the impact on children has been huge, both visible as well as invisible.
COVID-19 is a traumatic experience for adults and children alike. Is there any sort of clinical research or study which talks about what this sort of collective experience or tragedy might mean for our children?
So, we've had reports obviously by UNICEF, by the WHO, on what the impact of this is. We have run in India, we've seen smaller psychosocial studies being done. And the thing that we were reported, so CRY ran very quickly, was able to run an online study. And there were 2 or 3 things that emerged. One was that the kind of fear that children are gripped by. Yeah, of course, adults are gripped by as well, but clearly, if you are seeing your parents who are normally, your safe space, who are sort of in control of themselves, being out of control, yeah, it is a very frightening thing for young children. Yeah. It's exponential, right? So I think that experience of being unsafe, of not knowing, especially I think the first 3-4 months of the pandemic, we really didn't know how COVID would behave. So there was so much of paranoia about touching, about sanitizing, about, we've heard of parents running after children with, sanitizer and sanitizing vegetables and
going overboard.
Going
the protection mechanism.
overboard, and for children, young children especially, this is a very scary, frightening experience. So that is one part that we heard a lot of reporting. I am sure you're familiar with the fact that domestic violence has really gone up. Childline has had, of the 16 million calls that they've had, and that's really one of the living sources of data that we have in India, is Childline calls. Of that, so they were telling us of 4 million calls, 1.6 million was silent calls. And silent call means the child is being abused and is not able to say, because she or he is in this domestic space where the abuse or violence is occurring, and she's not able to say. So that's a very, very disturbing trend that we have.
Huge number.
It is huge, and this is just
and
the children who are aware of the helpline number and are able to call.
And this is within a 3-month period?
Within a 3-month
wow.
period. Yeah. So I know that most of us have been trying to work with Childline to see what we can do during this period. We've been working with district administrations to see if the responses can be better. And one of the things that we realized during this period was that it is necessary in this country, I think, to declare such helplines, such work as essential services. They need to operate, whether they are shelters for women suffering domestic violence or for children suffering domestic violence. We really need to reclassify so that, God forbid, we have a situation like this again. At least children have access. Yeah, so that is, so there are levels of things that we are hearing. So cries now, in fact, we just begun a survey with the Tata Institute, where we're actually just going to get the voices of children to figure out how they are feeling, what has happened, what are they, what can we then respond to?
Yeah, because trauma has a habit of showing up later, much later, and they're impressionable, they're young. This could really alter our social fabric 10 years down the line. Very possibly, it could.
I'm not, there is also this really interesting thing. I remember seeing this visual when we were doing the COVID relief work, and I would keep looking at the pictures that were being taken by local people on the ground. And at CRY, we were very lucky that we have people who are in the villages, so access was not an issue. And we already have the way we work is we track households, right? So the access was there. And I remember seeing a picture of 5 kids, where the older kid is teaching the younger ones how to do hand washing and so on. So children are also interestingly resilient. Yeah. They have found ways. I know that for a lot of, it's not just CRY, but I've seen a lot of civil society, we've been trying to run online sessions to just say, just paint, just draw, just make masks. And children, I think if we think about them as a constituency affected by COVID-19 in a trauma space, there are many things that we can do to actually help them in this time and to awake their sort of natural...
that primal response, survival mechanics as well, because kids are smarter than we give them credit for, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And resilience.
Yeah.
So one very critical thing that I want to speak about is nutrition. The data tells us that actually, thanks to the government's midday meal schemes that we have both in schools as well as in Anganwadis, as well as for lactating and pregnant mothers, a lot of people, millions of people get access to at least one nutritious full meal. And that actually not being available in this time has been and continues to be an issue because schools have not opened yet. There have been very successful take-home ration programs in most states. I was looking at enrollment data, and actually states in the east like Orissa, Jharkhand, Bihar have actually done huge enrollment drives. so that at least the children and families are registered for take-home rations. Sure. But the problem with take-home rations for children per se, and I know this sounds a bit selfish, but I guess you have to pardon me, I work for children, is that, if earlier the child was allotted so much food, she had it when she was in school. Now this is going to her home.
It's distributed.
And there's already hunger, and so her access is definitely limited.
Compromised, yeah.
So and we know that nutrition has an impact on mental health. It has an impact on everything, growth. So like you are correctly saying, some of these effects are also now beginning to sort of show up. Yeah.
I think you've touched on this anyway, but how has the pandemic limited accessibility for children, right? Not just in nutrition, but also healthcare and education.
Yeah.
And even juvenile justice.
That's terribly worrying. Yeah. So in the juvenile justice system, there are several ways with which information flows to the system, right? It's through police. It could be childline calls. It could be not-for-profits. It could be schools. Schools are a huge source of information because children report to teachers, to peers, etc. I always say the health system, because when nurses are trained to recognize abuse, so a child could come in with a burn and
put 2 and 2 together.
You can put 2 and 2 together, and they do. Right? So when all of that was missing, a lot of this flow of information to the system that takes care of children, that responds, and therefore, was limited. Though now the juvenile justice courts have also begun to work, the child welfare committees are finding ways to adapt online and so on, but it's not easy. We are not talking about urban people with a lot of access to gadgets.
Yeah, we're not. Digital access is still inequitable in India.
Exactly. So because of digital access, even for the system, it is an issue. The second, as you said correctly, that's in the area of protection. Access to helplines, right? Very often I don't have a phone in the house. There is only one phone. It is, if there is one phone, it is normally with just the eldest male type of thing, right? So access is very limited. And like I talked to you about the silent calls, I mean, what can I even say, right? If my...
sometimes you don't even have the language to articulate what's happening.
Exactly.
When you're young.
For very young children, so there's no question. So then there is nobody like visiting their homes to even know what's going on, right? So that lack, so that isolation of children to just 2 or 3 caregivers from actually having this whole bunch of community of people who are involved with you. That has been, I think that access to that has been an issue.
Yeah, because you don't raise a child alone, right?
No,
There's a community effort.
No, and even our law, even the systems that are created to protect children, work like that, right? Yeah. So if, for example, there is a threat in child marriage, and we've seen a huge spurt in child marriages, we've seen a huge spurt in child labor, because just simply the information is less now, right? We don't know who's going to do what. Yeah. Earlier there was a community that would step in and say, do not marry this child, she's only 30, or whatever it is. So that's one area. Access to school, of course. Digital access, I know, is much talked about by everybody.
So Puja, we're living in a remote world, right? And I think structurally that changes how we access education and how we try to get it to everyone. EdTech seems to be that shining solution for everyone right now. So how does EdTech fit into this accessibility question for the majority of children, at least right now?
Like I said, for the majority of children, I think we have to take a step back and say, first of all, what is the digital divide in this country, right? So no doubt there are 30% of people with, we have, maybe not, world-class sort of access. We have 4G, 5G, whatever. But for the remaining, access is now, thanks to mobile phones at least, there are some mobile phones. Internet connectivity is a huge issue. I mean, even with simple are able to provide people with proper systems and access and so on, internet is a problem. Yeah, a lot of our people who, for example, a lot of cry people gather data on tablets, and half the time they have to do it offline because there is no access in the village. So imagine now we are talking about children trying to access education in a situation where there really are very, very limited devices, limited internet. Most people, if you talk to them who are in the digital space for EdTech, they talk about having to boost whatever access. And like I said, a lot of it was delivered through digital centers, which essentially is based on a large number of children accessing one device. Now, with the social distancing problem, this problem has got multiplied for us. So earlier, our digital centers, we could cover, we used to cover around 20,000 kids. Now, in my digital centers, I can cover half that.
Yeah.
In order to be safe, right? Or else I run 6 sessions, in which case I pay more money and there is less
overclocking the system. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so there are all these issues of pure physical access that need to be sorted out. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that that can be overcome. There are we've been speaking to people, and for ourselves, for example, we had an IVRS in place in one state. The IVRS had been put in place for nutrition, but we were able to use it for... Yeah, so then for that, people don't need a mobile phone. Or you can have a listener club sort of thing, where one person puts it on. And so there are ways around. Yeah, people are innovating. We've had teachers in Telangana, Chhattisgarh actually. I was amazed by the commitment of the teachers, where they're making the children sit in the veranda of the school, and they're speaking on loudspeakers.
Yeah, we were never prepared for this. This is at best a remedial step that we're trying to take.
Yeah.
I think if our efforts on education, like you said, involve local innovations to try to on delivery, right? Because that seems to be the problem.
Yes. So once you've got content, and you've even got content in the language you need it in, you still need delivery. And coming back to one of something very dear to my heart, is please remember, EdTech cannot substitute human teachers and should not. It can supplement, because and these are studies across the world. I remember talking to a psychologist from North America, and they've done these studies for underprivileged kids in inner city schools. Teachers mean far more to underprivileged children than they do to privileged. Because privileged children may have other role models, they may have other more effective nurturing spaces, but for a lot of underprivileged children, the teacher is that lodestone. She's the North Star. The number of our children want to aspire to be teachers.
Because teachers in many communities are lifeboats. They raise everyone up.
So they don't just deliver math or English or science. So I feel very sad when we reduce education to math and science. It's not. It is one big part of it. But for our children at least, there is just so much more that happens in a school with a teacher. Modeling life skills, being protected, being safe, having a place where you can, bring in the information about, let's say, your friends getting married.
Yeah, being seen and validated.
Being seen and validated.
Do you think this is good? Are there any drawbacks? I know you mentioned a bit about, how this can, in toxic households, this could have huge consequences.
Yeah.
What are you saying about this increased family time?
So obviously there are both. Yeah, there are obviously the positive upsides of having families being around. And I am hoping a lot of increased or changed attitudes towards all of us about having to now, one of the adaptations we'll have to do to the pandemic is to make that family space more nurturing, more less toxic, right? And a lot of people are talking about now skilling parents, especially of 3 to 6 year olds, 0 to 6 year olds, to be able to work to nurture their children. Yeah? Which has always been the role of the teacher, has always been the role outside the house. So some of those rules are also coming in. All very well as long as we are all economically fine. But where the mother is, where there is already a patriarchy in place, where all parenting has to be done by the mother, then that mother is now sort of got no money, no food. She has to provide. She has to,
So there's the burden of care.
It's a burden of care, So there is that huge problem, and that is resulting in violence. It's resulting in short tempers, and for children, like you and I talked about, it's the long-term effects of that trauma are not good. We do need. I always think that how do we build stability? In an individual. Stability in an individual is when you have several sources of caring and love. That's why, grandparents are such a wonderful thing for children, right? So how do you build that within the household is, I think, a new challenge all of us will have to face and find ways to do.
Yeah, multi-generation homes do have positives as well. I think we have to navigate this in the new normal, and it's not...
But what we know about child sexual abuse, for example, that is not nice. It is toxic, right? 95% of child sexual abuse is the perpetrators are very well known to children, are often part of extended families. So how are we... There has to be greater awareness. There has to be greater protection. We have to take our role as I always say, if I as an adult don't take on my role of being the protector and the duty bearer, the child cannot have rights. Someone has to ensure, right?
Yeah.
So I think some of this, and this applies, Sartaj, to me across economic classes.
Yeah.
This is not just for the children.
It's not a localized issue. And it's not an income issue. This is across the board.
It's not an income issue. This has to apply across board. To understand safety better, to understand what children need better.
Yeah, and I think this is very vitally important because this also is linked to what we see later on manifesting on gender violence.
Absolutely.
Everything that we see at this younger age transmits forward, and children also inherit it, right? Because they inherit this dysfunctionality that they see.
We know that,
Yeah. So Puja, you've talked a lot about toxic households and the sense of safety that needs to exist in them. What's the role of the public sector, the civil society in helping this emerge, and also what should we expect from government? How can we push this sort of change through quickly?
Yeah. So I think definitely we need to look at opening schools in some way quickly. I think it's important for very young children, even older children, to get back into safer spaces that schools provide, and find a way around the social distancing, find a way around the safety and health protocols we will need to put in place. That, I think, is a definite will do. A lot of states have now begun immunization, have started the services, especially the health services, which had totally stopped because a lot of the health workers were busy, were being occupied with the COVID work, right? Obviously, where they were looking at checking, they were looking at preventing, they were doing all of that. And to me, so there's a whole bunch of things, obviously, that the larger public sector can do, or larger society, I think, including government, including civil society, can do to pay attention to vulnerable populations like children and make sure that we are looking at the services that cater to them. I was talking earlier about how helplines and shelters should be declared essential services so that they can continue even through a period like this, and the services are available to people. As civil society, I think, there are so many things that we felt that, we had done earlier that paid off. So, for example, working at the local level to ensure that there are enough providers and guardians for children. So we had activated the village child protection committees, and that's something that everybody should really do because they are there. Yeah, even in a pandemic, access to them is not limited. So ensuring that there are such committees in place, ensuring that children have voices. To me, the biggest thing that we need to do as public, as a civil society, as an NGO, whatever, is to say that, okay, maybe the construct of children having voices and being able to express themselves is not a big social normal in India, but it should be. Yeah. And if we are able to get children to feel agency and actually to be able to begin to solve their own problems, that would really help when something like this happens. Yeah. Right? Because children are used to saying, I need this, I don't need this, I will not get married, etc. But, and that's the caveat, that this work has to be done in conjunction with households. Positive parents, positive households who are acting as champions. And I have so many examples of adults who have stepped out of, sometimes very toxic spaces that they were in. We have a brothel owner in Calcutta, and I wish I knew her name. I mean, she actually took that step and said, we will make sure that we don't bring any underage girls. And that adult step can be so large. Yeah. So I think whenever we look at children's voices, we have to create the environment among parents, among communities of accepting those voices.
So just sort of to end the conversation, I know CRY is extremely well loved by retail donors who want to support it, and it is doing an important job. What is happening to the funding landscape? Because we know that a lot of the monies, right, from philanthropy and grants and other institutional money has flown into COVID, right? And it seems to be that constant trend or wave. How has it changed things for you as an organization and the sector in general? And also, do you think this is fundamentally changing how people give or think about, social giving in India?
So two things have happened. I think during COVID, especially during the lockdown, I would say the first 3-4 months, there's been a huge spurt of giving, and that's been wonderful. I think people who have never given have given in this time, have stepped out, have responded to an immediate situation, and that's amazing, because to my mind, once you've moved that in your head, once you're saying, even my $100 helps, or the rich are the rich, they will give, they know their money makes a difference. But when the middle class and average,
when everyone believes it,
starts believing that, my little money can also make a difference, or the huge feeling of I have helped, I have not sat still in this time, no? I've not sat dabke apne ghar mein.
I made a difference.
But I've been a warrior, yeah, and I have helped. So I think that shift has been a very good thing. What is obviously worrying is that so much of the money, especially institutional, corporate money, has gone into relief, or gone to various government funds, or gone to various, just gone, right? And so people have ended up spending 70% of their budgets already. So we are now facing a situation where regular work, the real work that's going to build that resilience and that recovery from this space. Like, for example, the example I was giving you about immunizations going down to 20%, right? Now we need to recover. Yeah. We have to do immunization drive. The kids who are never going to come back to school because they're so bored. They've forgotten how to sit in school. A 5-year-old is not going to go back easily to school.
Yeah.
Or even a 10-year-old, right? So to take them back to school, we're going to need. So that is the crisis that I see, which is that the money available for regular, the boring, non-relief work.
Yeah.
But the real work that will build resilience in communities
has been depleted.
It has been depleted. The funds have been depleted.
So how are you managing that then? Like, what's your strategy to approaching this problem?
So, like I said, there is money. A lot of foreign institutions are looking at COVID as a worldwide disaster and are really opening up their pockets. Of course, in India, it has currently become a little difficult to get some of that money. And I hope that that is an appeal that our government will hear, that this is not the time to look at, be fearful. This is the time to get as many resources as we can from across the world. After all, one of the largest percentages of children who live in poverty live in India.
Yeah. I think 1 in every 5 child.
Yeah, 1 in every 5 children, right? And when you talk about these numbers at international forums, they get shocked. Because just to think of, I mean, the number that we have just declared malnourished is what, the population of, we recently looked at that number. I realized it was the population of the whole of Venezuela. Is our population of undernourished, malnourished children declared by government numbers? So we are talking millions here, right? And there is money available, I think, some of it. And that's some money that we should be able to access. A lot of regular donors also have been wonderful. I've been talking to organizations about, how we've been working through COVID. One of the greatest advantages has been of the strange online world we are in is that you're suddenly having many more conversations.
Yeah.
And much more collaboration between NGOs. And one of the things I am hearing is that regular donors, and what we've experienced as well, have really come forward and said, don't worry, you can use this money for relief right now. You can do. So there has, I think there's also that among the good people are getting better.
Yeah, they're stepping up.
They're stepping up.
Great. Well, I really hope, Puja, that CRY continues to grow from strength to strength and help more children. And we're excited to support you in any way we can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.